Welcome everyone to One Team Always, maintaining an inclusive team working together to accomplish the mission. My name is Jonathan Tessier, and I welcome you to our webinar presentation. And when we're talking about teams, we want to start by sort of setting the context for what we want to accomplish during this call. The most connected teams always win. One of the leader's most important responsibilities is assembling all of the talent of a team and then getting that talent to play together and play as a team. There's a difference between a staff and a team. A staff works individually to do their job and kind of stay out of trouble. As a staff member, you don't necessarily want to make sure you're rocking the boat. You just put your head down and you do what you can. On a team, though, we care more about collective results. On a true team, we care more about us winning. We care about whether other team members are winning. On a team, it should be, I care about my team members, period. So as part of what we're going to show today as the One Team Always program, we're going to look at several different aspects of what you can do to help make your team strong. And we have a very effective agenda today that's going to look at how we can stay mission focused, how we can incorporate appreciative inquiry into our team. We're also going to look at things like diversity and inclusion and be aware of what we can do to make sure that everyone's feeling engaged in our team. And we're also going to look at leadership coaching, how that can really foster a positive, strong team environment. And we're going to look at ways we can stay focused and reach our mission when we're working in a very dynamic world. We have several wonderful speakers lined up for you, and we're going to start things off with Michael Little, who's going to talk about some of the DNA that we find in some of the most successful teams. Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. This is Michael Little. I am a 20-year-plus experienced corporate executive from sales, marketing, and operations, and I've had to work in diverse teams that are all domestic-based to diverse teams that have been multicultural around the globe. So as we talk through these examples and solutions that will be presented to you, I feel like every one of these have a strong, positive type of experience that will come forth to support whatever team you're part of. So for me to get started, Sian, if you don't mind going over to the overview on the what One Team Always program is. So what is One Team Always? One Team Always is built of 6 different solutions focusing on a variety of options that any organization and team lead can utilize to help support their team driving towards the mission and accomplishing the mission. So One Team Always, you'll see here, our mantra and our motto is maintaining an inclusive team working together to accomplish the mission. So first, what is One Team Always? Well, we're mission focused. We want to drive to that mission through a very inclusive team to make sure everyone's making a difference and we're fostering the right type of atmosphere and culture to reach the mission that is set. All of them have a very rich dynamic to them, and you'll hear more about each one here shortly. Covering that positive core, looking and focusing on the strengths of it. Values of that practice, the department. So it's a very strong dynamic. Have your compliance refresher, and that really helps to maintain a respectful workplace, to ensure a healthy functioning of an organization. It is set up as a self-paced program and is more conducive to implement for your compliance-oriented training. But at the end of the day, it really helps ensure organizational integrity. If you're looking to more creating an engaging environment, then our diversity and inclusion awareness program could be very well suited for you. It's a virtual training program and it's targeting at professional development to build cultural competence of the participants. Courses can include addressing unconscious bias, diversity and inclusion at the workforce, fostering an inclusive environment, and inclusive leadership training. So it's a very dynamic virtual training program that is being set up for everybody. From there, you can engage with leadership coaching. Leadership coaching, as you would imagine, is really about fostering that courageous leadership environment. It can be one-on-one coaching, it can be small group coaching. Either way, it will provide an opportunity to engage in a cultural and behavioral transformational behavior changes. So the goal can be for your leadership team, it can to improve on how they support their team and the environment within it, or it can be even for the team to foster new leaders to grow within the organization. And finally, you have the strategic advisory service, and that's really helping to steer the organization in a very dynamic and transformational world at this point. So within that, we have been doing research and building out best practices from around the globe. And what we want to do there in an advisory format is just share the best practices and what is working and what doesn't work, so you can determine the right way to bring this opportunity of advisory into your organization and workforce. So overall, we've got experience across a dynamic group of organizations within government agencies, from fire departments, fire and rescue, sheriff and local police forces, to centers of disease and controls. So we have a good experience already working with this. Most of the programs we are about to introduce have been implemented on a variety of levels within these government agencies, but now we finally built a cohesive program that we're calling the One Team Always. So Sian, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we'll talk about why this is so important. Great. So there's three key pieces on why One Team Always program should be implemented within your groups. First, you want to foster a mission-focused culture. When you're fostering that type of culture, everyone is driving towards the mission and not getting distracted. And therefore, you're being able to accomplish your mission, your project, the result in the time frame you want to be accomplished in without many deterrences coming forth. Second, you really need to build that cohesive team. Now, there's a lot of teams out there that are very strong, but you can always try to improve it, especially in today's environment within our nation, on how to improve the team to become more cohesive. And third, we want to make sure everyone is valuing the individual differences within that team. So within your organization, everyone is coming from a different background, a different dynamic, and we should foster that and want to use that diversity and the differences to bring new concepts, new brainstorming, and new ways of thinking to light to drive towards the mission. So finally, Sian, if you could go to the how, we'll talk about how this can happen for everybody. So how would you see the best way to implement a One Team Always program? Well, first, as an organizational leader, you need to understand the solutions and programs that ICAT Consulting can offer you. And that's one of the reasons why we have this presentation. But second, from our side as consultants, we need to sit down with you and fully understand what your organization is about. So we want to develop a very good understanding of your culture, of your behaviors, of the missions you're trying to accomplish, and make sure we feel like part of the team as far as being immersed within the group. So together, if once you understand our programs and our solutions, and we understand your culture and the organizational team, then we can match the right program for your organizational need. And that way you can have a winning solution that comes forth to accomplish the mission at hand. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jonathan. And Jonathan, you can continue from there.
Michael, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So good overview of what the One Team Always program includes. Let's dive in a little bit deeper into some of the elements that Michael mentioned. First up, we're going to have Lon, and he is going to talk about the DNA of a high-performing team. Lon, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lon Barfield, and I have been in the world of work for working on teams for 40-plus years. The first team I was on, ironically, was a fire team in the Marine Corps. So that's a little bit different than some of the things we're going to talk about, but at the same time, related to particularly the folks in the fire service. I was on a hazmat team for 15 years, and so I learned intimately what it was like to be able to trust the people that I work with, to be able to understand how we can drive each other to excellence. And in doing so, we then start to see some of the principles that you'll see laid out in our program. Sian, could you move to the next screen, please? So what I want to talk about are what are some of the characteristics associated with having a high performance team. And to my first point, I've been in life or death situations, and I needed to know that the people that were there with me on my team had my back. I knew that I could count on them. They knew that they could count on me. Well, there's a level of trust that comes with time and understanding, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later and how we do things, what we do, and what it's all about, how we are accountable to each other. One of the things that a high-performing team has, that you'll see very quickly, is they have a relentless persistence to pursuing excellence. They want to be the best that they can possibly be in that team. And we'll talk a little more about some of the other things associated with that. But they really, one of the ways that this happens is they really encourage open communication. They're not any secret because your life is being trusted with these folks in a lot of cases. The hardest thing for any human to do, and this is one of the things that makes a high performance team excel, is the team members are able to be honest with themselves first. If they can't do something, or they can't meet a deadline, or they can't execute as promised, they need to be comfortable enough to come forward and say, I can't do this. That's what the team starts to come about and help with. Sian, can we move to the next screen, please? So one of the other questions that comes to mind is, why should I invest in a high-performing team? Well, there's one thing at the top of the list, and you'll see this will show up again throughout the whole presentation here today, is integrity. Integrity is one of those things, either you have it or you don't have it. It's not a 90% thing, it's not a 95% thing. A high-performing team is accountable to each other, and the integrity shows through. There is pride of ownership. This is our team, this is my team. That ownership itself tends to lend itself to people operating at a very high level and holding each other accountable for doing the same thing. Again, the other key, the glue in my mind that binds every high-performing team together is open communication. There's harmony among the team because there is open communication and there are not any egos. You're really about the mission, as Michael said earlier, and you'll hear this over and over again. The whole goal is to execute in excellence. And adding to the bottom line, whether the bottom line be get out of this alive, get out of this safely, go home to our families the same way we came, or adding to the bottom line of the organization itself. The investments are paramount to the success of any team. So can we move to the next slide, Sian, please? And so to finish this off, how do we create a high-performing team culture? Well, there are three things in all business that exist. And in order for you to have a successful business and certainly a successful team, you have to have these three elements: people, processes, and tools. And as you can see, the people element of this is to create this culture, we need to have celebration of differences. In my past life, I've been fortunate enough to lead teams that were multicultural, multinational. We've been all over the world. Here's a prime example. For 2 years, I ran a team that we had members from 7 countries. We never met face to face. We had one common goal. We did everything by teleconference, and we learned what each other's strengths and weaknesses were. We worked together as a team to execute something the organization had never had before. And the reason we did is because we celebrated who had the strong points. We were all mission oriented. It was a team focused accountability. We all owned it, and we owned it with integrity. The elements associated with any team are the people, but in order to execute things, you have to have processes. And those processes need to be dynamically focused on the missions of the team, to what Michael was speaking of earlier, and you'll hear more about. But those processes need to be clear, they need to be executable, and they need to be repeatable. These are the rules of the road. So how do we get there? What are those tools? Well, the tools relative to the team's mission are the tools that you need. This will fit anywhere, but it has to be your tool. So they also, no matter what the tools are, they need to be scalable, sustainable, and easy for your team to use. The team gets to work with these tools. This is how they execute and accomplish the mission. And this team also needs to have the tools and the processes and the people that interact well with all of the other organizations, the systems that they feed and get fed by. So at the end of the day, a high-performing team is a lot of elements that you can see. We go into great detail about what these are, how to do them, and how that ties back into all of the other things that you'll hear in this program. So Jonathan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Lon, thank you so much. That is very interesting and good to know that there are those 3 key areas of every high-performing team culture. So it's what we can focus in on. Great. Okay, so moving right along, our next presenter is going to help us take a look at the idea of appreciative inquiry. So you may or may not be familiar with this concept, but it's really about looking at teams from a very positive perspective. And I'm happy to introduce you to Verdon. Verdon, take it away.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I want to briefly mention a bit about my background. For over 40 years now, I've been experienced in the areas of training, organization, and people development. I've worked with both local, state, regional, and federal government agencies, private startups, nonprofit management and consulting, and global financial services, most specifically in the banking and insurance industries. My areas of focus have been in strategic planning, culture transformation and change management, leadership development, and instructional systems design. And I was introduced to this concept of appreciative inquiry, ironically, by our esteemed colleague, Dr. Gabe Hamda. And it was about 4 years ago in some of our ongoing dialogue that Gabe mentioned this idea to me. And I did extensive research only to find out that it had been around for over 35 years. And to my surprise, in spite of my extensive experience, I had never heard of it before, but I quickly gravitated toward the ideas and the concepts supporting appreciative inquiry. What I learned in my research was that it had been used by hundreds of organizations worldwide to drive both small and large scale change. You can go on now, Sion, to our next slide, tell you a little bit more about what appreciative inquiry is. It's an innovative approach to strategic planning and organizational development and change management. It's a strength-based approach rather than a problem-focused approach. And it is very important to make that distinction, as we'll see as we go along. Appreciative inquiry, by its own description, deliberately asks questions that are designed to ignite constructive dialogue and inspired actions within organizations. And the ultimate goal is to discover the positive core that motivates people to excel and to share a collective vision for the future that, of course, is based upon their stated mission. Appreciative inquiry really is about relationship management in many respects. And honestly, if you think about organizations, they're made up of people, and people have to interact and form relationships, either effective relationships or not so effective relationships, not only within each other and among the team, but also among a broader spectrum of stakeholders and clients and vendors and the community at large. So there are lots of relationships that are involved in the process. And on a side note, I'll make an analogy because Gabe knows this, but many of my colleagues may not, that I have a passion outside of my corporate involvement for marriage coaching. And I've actually employed the concepts of appreciative inquiry in that space of working with married couples who may either be struggling within their marriage or have reached a certain point where they hit a wall and they're stagnant. And what I've done, applying some of these same concepts, is to challenge a couple to reflect on the highest and best experiences that they've enjoyed in their relationship, regardless of where it is at this point in time. I've asked them to identify feelings of when they were operating at their best, not only individually, but as a unit, as a team, collectively. And then I've asked them to identify factors that led to those periods of peak performance in their relationship. Well, this is in many ways the same as what is done within an organizational climate assessment that we would utilize appreciative inquiry as a tool to accomplish that assessment. An assessment would look at a series of diagnostic tools that would identify reoccurring patterns of behavior, attitudes, and feelings that characterize life in the organization. And at the heart of the appreciative inquiry assessment is something known as an appreciative interview. And this is a key activity that's designed to collect rich qualitative information in the form of stories about these peak performances and times of operating at your best, which carry a wealth of meaning rather than just pulling together dry quantitative data consisting of a bunch of figures and statistics, as is often the case with traditional problem-solving approaches. The ultimate aim is to discover the forces that give life to the organization. And if you'll move on, Sion, I'll share with you all, why this is so important and why appreciative inquiry and an assessment such as this could positively affect an organization. There are four things that I want to point out. Appreciative inquiry, when it's done right, builds the core strengths of an organization, or it builds upon those core strengths. It shifts the focus of the dialogue from organizational weaknesses to the organizational strengths, and lets individuals as well as the industry stick to its fundamental principles as opposed to getting sidetracked, as often is the case, by some of the complex finger pointing that occurs with the problem solving approach. And lastly, it brings a wholesome change that benefits every aspect of the firm. And Sion, if you go on to the next slide, I'll just wrap up by giving you a little bit of the how this actually works. If you think about the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer, a thermostat regulates the temperature and changes the climate in the environment, whereas a thermometer merely reads the temperature but can't impact any meaningful change. Well, the appreciative inquiry process is more of a proactive approach that sets the climate, sets the temperature. And the way it does so is, first of all, to take the temperature of what's going on in the organization. And that is done through, as mentioned, the appreciative inquiry interview document, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. But that happens at the discovery and the dream stage of this 4-cycle process, which is the traditional means in which appreciative inquiry as a total process works. The first stage is discovery, where we're acknowledging and appreciating what actually is. And that is obtained by way of asking strategic questions in this interview that enables people to play to their strengths. Ultimately, the goal of this appreciative inquiry is to identify the positive core. And what exactly is the positive core? Well, it actually focuses the organization on looking at its greatest assets, its capacities, its capabilities, its resources, and its strengths in order to create this vision of the future by understanding its past strengths and opportunities. And from there, we would, in the course of that same interview process, enter the dream phase of this cycle, in which we're imagining and appreciating what can be, what will be. There's a famous quote by Robert F. Kennedy, senator, who made the statement that so many people look at things as they are and ask the question, why? But I look at things as they could be and ask, why not? The dream phase is really about the why not. Where can we be? How can we get there? Why would we want to get there? And from there, imagining and appreciating what will be, then moves into the design and delivery phases. This doesn't happen in the organizational climate assessment. This would only occur if there is a desire to move forward beyond just taking the temperature and identifying where an organization may be, and then beginning to work on deciding where it should be by putting together formal design processes that will co-construct this future state. And then, of course, delivering on those designs by creating that future status through a series of applying strategies and putting things into practice. Just in conclusion, I want to mention that this organizational climate assessment begins with identifying who your key stakeholders are within your organization, co-constructing an interview questionnaire that asks these strategically placed positive questions, identifying and training interviewers to conduct the interviews, going forward and conducting those interviews, and then compiling, analyzing, and reporting the results out. From there, we would determine whether or not to move into the design and delivery phases. Well, that's what I have to share at this point, and I'll turn it back to you, Jonathan.
Hey, Verdon, thank you for that. I do have a quick question for you. I was very surprised to hear that Appreciative Inquiry is 35 years old. If anybody asked me to guess how old it was, I would have never said that old. So I learned something new today. But with regard to that, what would you say is one of the key drivers of Appreciative Inquiry, especially in recent years?
Well, I think that, first of all, there are a lot of practitioners who are not utilizing this concept. But what I think is helping to drive it is the traditional approaches to problem solving make an assumption that people and organizations are fundamentally broken and need to be fixed. So they go about this process of, it usually looks something like this: identify the key problem, analyze the root causes of failure, search for possible solutions, and then develop an action plan. The difference between that and the way that Appreciative Inquiry approaches it is, in contrast to traditional problem solving, its underlying assumption is that people and organizations are not broken, but they're highly generative. They're always evolving, growing, and moving toward the future. And so AI approaches, as it's known, the process by not looking for root causes of failure, but looking for root causes of success. And that whole paradigm shift and that whole dynamic changes the atmosphere, literally, and changes the environment. People are much more inclined to engage in constructive dialogue, not fearing the finger pointing and blame shifting, but rather looking at positive attributes of an organization and individuals within that organization. And from that positive point of view, they're far more predisposed to want to advance toward a dream and a new design and impact change. And quite frankly, in the current rather toxic environment in which we're operating in our country, this is a refreshing change to approaching organizational development and design.
Great. Verdon, thank you. That makes total sense. I love the idea of switching to what is right rather than looking for a problem. And so that's a really interesting concept. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move right on to our next presenter. And what we're going to talk about next, Sion, you could move the slide there, is we're going to talk about EEO compliance. It's a little bit of a refresher. And compliance is one way to ensure an organization's integrity. And we have for you Gabe Hamda. Gabe, take it away.
Jonathan, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and greetings to all our the audience and my colleagues. I want to begin by acknowledging my team members. So I'm not going to go name by name, but I just want to tell you, I know every one of the presenters here. They are friends. They are amazing people. The one thing we have in common is that we all care about our communities, and we want to create a better world. Okay, so that's what brings us together. And you know, everyone here represents various industries and various subject matter expertise. So I'm very happy and excited to work with my colleagues here. And you know, my piece is EEO Compliance Refresher. This is probably one topic that our audience knows the most about. And so having said that, a little bit about myself, you know, Gabe Hamda, President and CEO of ICAT Consulting. So ICAT has been in business 26 years, and we work with various organizations and work on different projects. And one of the projects we accomplished was implementing EEO Compliance Refresher in a city government. So in that environment, we implemented this program or provided this refresher training to city employees, fire and rescue, as well as sheriff's office. So we covered the whole city government, and we provided this training to managers and to employees. And one of my, you know, exciting memories of this program is, in the end, after doing this program for many years, there was reduction in discrimination complaints, which is good news to the organization. And just having been part of that and to see, you know, happier employees where, you know, discrimination complaints are reduced, just to be part of that is exciting. And that's part of what I want to share. So everything we present here, we've done it in one shape or another, and that's, we're presenting the best of what we learned and what will help future organizations. With that, Sion, if you can move to the next slide. So the EEO Compliance Refresher, as I said, you know, most, I'm assuming, you know, most of our audience members would know this topic. So for one, this program is consistent with the EEOC regulations at the federal level. So it will have, you know, federal reference there. Also, it will have, you know, not only federal, but also local compliance regulations will be included. So it will include, you know, federal as well as local government compliance regulations, okay? And when the program is implemented, it will be, it is offered to managers and employees separately, because the program we give managers is different from the program we give employees. What the employees receive is for them to know the difference between, you know, good performance, bad performance, versus discriminatory actions that may be impacting them. And for managers, it is to how to treat employees fairly based on the federal and local regulations. And this program is implemented during onboarding, you know, when new employees or new managers join our organization. They take this program, and also the program is given as a professional development on a yearly basis so that people don't forget, and that's why we call it refresher. With that, Sion, if you can move to the next slide. So the benefits of this program, for one, it creates and maintains a respectful workplace for all. So a workplace is considered successful, as my colleagues spoke about, teams, when all players are winning, the managers and employees with different backgrounds, employees who do different things are all winning. That organization is considered winning. So we want to create a respectful workplace for all. And also when there is compliance, there is a regulation, there is a law, and when everyone is complying, guess what? It creates a win-win-win outcome for everyone included. Also, I guess the elephant in the room is, when compliance is not there, there is a lawsuit which can be very costly. And so this eliminates costly lawsuits. So we don't want to say reduce, we just want to say flat out eliminate costly lawsuits. So this is one way for an organization to stay healthy. I guess the analogy of this is kind of like all the wellness things we do in life, the fitness and eating healthy and, staying out of stress. And by doing all of this, we prevent, sickness and illness. And so for any organization to stay healthy, stay out of lawsuit, stay out of the big, news stories, is to implement a program like this. With that, next slide. Now, based on ICAT experience, we believe the best way to implement this program is to do a self-paced e-learning. Our previous experience is to put out trainers who did classes, every Friday, every Tuesday, just live training classes. So we recommend this program be implemented using self-paced e-learning, okay? So, some of the benefits of doing it by self-paced e-learning, you can easily keep track of, who participated, who maintained mastery, because there are built-in activities. We can tell, people who really mastered, the compliance items there, and also people who completed and people who started and people who never even participated. So self-paced e-learning makes it possible to track the status of everyone who participated. Also, this can be implemented consistently. When you do this program using trainers, one day the trainer may not be there. Trainer may have a bad day, good day, but this program can be implemented consistently. Also, most importantly, as we work with different fire and rescue, this program can be customized local organizational requirements. The federal regulation remains the same, but the local regulations and ordinances may vary. So ICAT will be in a position to customize the program so that for your local government or for your organization, the policies and procedures can be incorporated. With that said, ICAT Consulting is ready, willing, and able to develop this program, put it on self-paced e-learning so that your organization can be 100% in compliance, and you will know that you'll get a report when, who and, what took the program on a yearly basis. And I know I did not indicate in the slide, but, we are estimating this will be a 45-minute self-paced e-learning, and this will be one way the organization can remain healthy. Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Gabe. Quick question for you. When it comes to compliance, what would you say is one of the biggest challenges an organization faces in order to stay compliant?
I would say, you said the biggest, maybe the simplest thing an organization can do to remain in compliance is creating an awareness at different levels. There are managers. If managers know their responsibilities and employees know their responsibilities and the two parties know, primarily the difference between there are employee actions based on bad performance. Jonathan, if I work for you, if every assignment you give me, I don't do it on time, and you say, Gabe, you are not cutting it, okay? You either deliver future projects on time, or we're gonna have to replace you, okay? And then you remove me from that position. So, that is the personnel action you took for this, lack of performance on my part is based on my performance. This has nothing to do with the discriminatory act. So it is knowing the differences. So in the training we've done by providing the differences and case studies between, employee action for bad performance versus discrimination, that can, help an organization be in compliance, and employees will complain less for discrimination, and instead there will be a good performance.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Gabe. All righty, we are going to move on to our next presenter, and we are going to get into the world of something that Gabe was hinting at a little bit there, and that's this idea of diversity and inclusion awareness. And we have Melanie here who's going to talk about creating an engaging environment. Melanie?
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, a little bit about my background, and I spent the first part of my career with Johnson & Johnson. And then for the last 20 years, I've served as an executive coach and an encourager of leadership development, working with individuals, teams, and organizations in industries from tobacco to healthcare to government agencies. Diversity at its finest right there. One of the things that I've learned throughout the course of my career is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Sian, if you could move to the next slide. Diversity and inclusion as an initiative has been around for decades. And those of you that have been in the world, in the business world or anywhere in the world, realize that diversity is something that we now have. Diversity is simple. It's one word definition. Diversity, is differences. Diversity is differences. Differences in and of themselves can be a bit irritating, at least it is in my home. But I love differences, but only if I understand the qualities of why someone is different. So that's that piece of inclusion, that sense of belonging. And I believe that one of the critical components that's missing in this area of inclusion, and as we look back and we listen to Gabe and we listen to Lon, inclusion is critical in our teams. And one of the stumbling blocks on that, I believe, is this unconscious bias, this piece of unconscious bias. Sian, if you would advance, please. Thank you. So you see there that top bullet point talks about how we've called for it, where 95% of all of our thinking is done in our subconscious mind. That's that part that becomes that unconscious piece where emotions, actions, visual, all create a thought, and we're not even aware of it. So what we want to do is remove some of those deeply embedded unconscious biases to a more conscious level. So not take them away, but just raise them to an awareness in our mind so that we can mitigate any negative impact that we may have on business, on life. And by the way, not all biases are negative. When I first was introduced to this concept of unconscious bias, I was surprised actually at where one of my then unconscious, but brought to the conscious level, lied. And it really worked in favor of the particular people group. But what that did is, by me favoring that people group, unconsciously, I was making business decisions that affected those that were outside of that people group. And so thereby not making the best decisions. Sion, if we could have the last slide, and where we talk about, so how are we going to do it? It is going to happen through interactive facilitated workshops where individuals together will explore your unconscious bias and this thing of privilege blindness, using tools, activities, so that we can just open our minds and expand our thinking. Because when we shed light on our unconscious bias and bring them to a conscious level, we free ourselves and our organizations to rise to the next level of success. And with that, Jonathan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Melanie, thank you so much. I really like 2 points that you made in your presentation. And the first is a little bit even, I'm embarrassed to say that with all the diversity inclusion training that I have taken, I've never heard any of them really boil down diversity to one simple word, which was differences. So I just want to give you kudos for doing that. And second, I like that you also emphasize that not all biases are negative, and making yourself aware of them doesn't mean you have to necessarily change them. Just be aware of them so that you can use them in a beneficial way.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Oh, all right. Well, guess what? Next up is me. I am going to talk to you about leadership coaching, this idea of fostering a courageous leadership environment. My background has been in training. I have, with my education, been an instructional designer. I also do a lot of designing of PowerPoint presentations and other communication materials. And additionally, I'm also a certified coach. And so I wanted to talk about leadership coaching for you today. And to start off with, I'd like to keep you in mind that let's talk about this word talent that we hear so often. And it's funny because usually when we hear the word talent, we are frequently thinking that this describes someone who is intelligent or maybe even athletic. But what exactly does this term talent mean? Now, instead of giving you a dictionary definition of the term, I would rather tell you a story that I think really illustrates precisely what a talent is. So take a moment and just sit back in your chair, relax for a moment. If you want, close your eyes, and I want you to follow along as I tell you this story. So if you're ready, here we go. This is the story of Mr. Bunny Rabbit. Sion, next slide, please. All right. We want Mr. Bunny Rabbit to be a well-rounded animal. To be well-rounded, he will need to be skilled at running, swimming, and tree climbing. So we decide to measure his performance. First up, running. Here, Mr. Rabbit shines. He runs to the top of the hill and back down, and he scampers all about. When asked about how he feels about his performance, Mr. Rabbit says, "I feel great. I can't believe it," he says. "I get to do what I do best." Mr. Rabbit's boss acknowledges the fact that Mr. Rabbit has a talent for running. Next, Mr. Rabbit's skill at climbing trees is measured. A tree trunk is placed at a 30-degree angle, so he has a chance to succeed. Mr. Rabbit tries really hard, so hard, in fact, his legs start to hurt. Still, he only makes it a short distance up the trunk. Mr. Rabbit's boss makes note of the rabbit's failed attempt. "We'll have to work on this piece of your performance," says the boss. The comment discourages the little bunny. Next, Mr. Rabbit's performance is measured in swimming. Mr. Rabbit can't really recall a time when rabbits ever had to swim. So he approaches this test with a great deal of fear. In fact, he expresses his concern to the boss. "Wait," he says, "I don't like to swim." Mr. Rabbit's boss responds, "Well, you may not like it now, but in time down the road, you'll come to realize what a good thing this is for you." And with that, Mr. Rabbit's boss throws the tiny bunny into the water. In seconds, the bunny goes down. The only thing that comes to the surface are a few bubbles. Mr. Rabbit's boss sees this and pulls the soaked bunny out. The rabbit feels humiliated, but is glad it is over. Mr. Rabbit's boss contemplates the situation for a few moments before coming to a conclusion. "Mr. Rabbit," says the boss, "you're just fine at running. And for that reason, I think you need to spend less time on that skill and more time on the other two." When the rabbit hears this, he throws up. Now I want you to take a moment and think about the story I just gave you. What is it teaching us about what a talent is and how it impacts our lives? You know, every animal possesses certain innate talents, or as I like to think about it, reoccurring patterns of behavior and physical skills that are going to help it to survive and thrive. Well, guess what? People are no different. Albert Einstein once said, "Everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid." When we expect a rabbit to climb a tree or to swim, I think we can all agree that we would be setting this creature up for failure. The same is true of people. If you do not let people work in the areas of their talents, they will not perform at their best. But if you do let people operate in the areas of their talents, the results can be significant. So let me illustrate the idea of our unique talents in one other way for you. And for this demonstration, I'm going to need your help. So if you have available near you, go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pen. I want you to do something for me. Okay, if you have that piece of paper and pen handy, what I'd like you to do is, using your dominant hand, write your name 3 times in a row. And just let me know when you finish.
I'm done.
Okay. All right. Now what I want you to do is I want you to take that pen and put it in your non-dominant hand, and I want you to write your name 3 more times in a row using that non-dominant hand. And again, just let me know when you're finished.
It's going to take forever.
You're on to something, Gabe.
It's too frustrating. I'm not doing it.
Man. What did we do to you, man?
Done but ugly.
Wow.
Done but ugly. I like that.
Chicken scratch.
Okay, let's look at your results here, okay? So let's start off with the dominant hand. I want you to think for a few moments about what it was like to write your name with your dominant hand. Who has an idea? What was it like?
Easy.
Easy.
Didn't have to think.
Anyone else?
Didn't have to think.
Didn't have to think about it. Yep.
Natural, second nature.
Natural, second nature. Yeah, you're getting at it, right? When we do something that is second nature to us, I'll use Verdon's words there, it's like you can do the task quickly. You don't have to put much effort into it. You didn't really have to think about it that much or concentrate really hard when doing the task, right? And that, look at your results. You produced probably consistent results and quality results. Now let's flip that to the non-dominant hand. And when you think about writing with your non-dominant hand, what was that like?
Clunky.
Clunky, I like that word. And Gabe, you already said it wasn't easy. And Melanie, I think you said that you were ready to already give up on it. Anything else?
It was awkward and frustrating.
Awkward and frustrating. Yes, thank you for that. So yeah, you know, when you do something that is not second nature to you, that does not come naturally to you, it takes more time to accomplish the task. It takes more effort. And even while you're doing that effort, you likely had to think more and concentrate more on what you were doing. And yet all that effort got you what? Mediocre results at best, maybe even results that had poorer quality. Well, our talents are like the hand that we write with. We don't have to think or concentrate nearly as much when using our talents because, as Verdon said, it feels very second nature to us. And that's when you know you have a talent in action in your life. Go ahead and go to the next slide. When we think about writing in our signature, it's a great metaphor for what we're talking about when we're talking about our talents. It's an ability for us to do a task in an efficient way. And as a result of doing that task in ways that are in alignment with our talents, we end up producing much higher quality results. And so when you think about that, wow, that's a huge key to whether or not I'm going to meet with success in my life. And so it is our responsibility to find out what our true talents are, not what other people tell us they should be, but what they truly are, because if we understand what our talents are, we know how we need to approach tasks and how we need to work at the challenges that we face in our lives. Next slide, please. So that's where coaching comes into play. Coaching can have and does offer some simple but powerful tools that can quickly uncover what your innate talents are. And again, innate is the key word there because that's reoccurring patterns of thought and behavior that will cause us to act and approach things in a certain way. And since talents play such a critical role in our lives, it's especially important that we figure out what they are. Now, one of the biggest reasons our talents do not get expressed is because we tend to focus on the negative in our lives instead of the positive. So just as Verdon was telling you that teams look at the problems that we have on our team, individually we do the same thing. We look at what's wrong with us, not what's right with us. Self-help expert Susan Jeffers once said, "We have been taught to believe that negative equals realistic and positive equals unrealistic. The truth is that focusing on your weaknesses will only bring about a marginal improvement to your performance, as we saw in the rabbit story I told you. And this performance at the same time is going to require a great deal of effort. But when it comes from a place of our talents, and we focus on our talents and using them instead, we can experience huge growth and huge improvement. Each of us has the greatest potential for success when we express and use our talents. Your talents are key to having a fulfilling life." And with that, I'm going to hand it back to myself, and we're going to move on to the next topic. And we are going to end with David, and David is going to tell us about strategic advisory. That's the idea of steering the organization in what we all face is a very dynamic world. David?
Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks to all of my teammates that went before. My background, my last 38 years have been spent around human capital and developing teams and developing organizations. And I've done that through HR, but I consider myself a business person around human capital. I have had the good fortune, and this is listening to Gabe, of being sued or at least had cases in terms of how we've treated our employees on 5 different continents. And so the world as we see it today is a very complex place. And when we think of the steering the organization in a dynamic world, that is what advisory service and advisory services are going to help us deal with, confront, and lead to, so the environment and our cultures are much more healthy, they're much more satisfying for the career-minded, and much more welcoming in terms of how we manage and develop ourselves. So when we think of advisory services, all that you've heard before from my outstanding colleagues is a form of an advisory service. Every one of the things that we've talked about is a component that will help you lead your organization to better outcomes. Sion, please go to my what slide. We define advisory services that help problem solve through assessment of our current culture and our communication methods to develop findings, conclusions, and recommendations prepared at the behest of leadership. It can be project-based, it can be day-to-day, it can be issue-based, it can be one-on-one, all at the behest of leadership to help their organization deal with our world and deal with their work worlds more as a team, with more fluidity, with the ability to pivot, with the ability to direction set, all trying to make our organizations better. So sometimes we can say it's problem solving, sometimes we can say it's objective setting, but all advisory is the what, is how do we align our mission to our people and align those values to actions that allow us to connect and to be more mission-oriented, more mission-focused, and more able to accomplish that objective. Dayan? Why is that needed? I think when we look at how complex the world is, we are multi-generational, more so than we've ever been in our careers, more so because of what 2020 has brought us from racial inequalities and that debate, to a pandemic, to working virtually, to working in our physical spaces safer. All of those things have created a world that is filled with many more challenges than we've seen in our past. And these challenges will not be subsiding anytime. So how best do we work in a world like this when all of us know we do not have every one of the answers? We look for and we find people that can help us navigate. And so the advisory in that sense is I call on experts, I look for experts that allow me and help me deal with human capital problems. And I look for methods to help my employees, my people get stronger in what they do, become more focused on mission, and help us communicate in a way that allows us to get the most done with the teams that we have. When we look at budgets, we look at all the things that are happening in our environment that are attacking us financially, we're all being asked to do more with less. Our expertise, my expertise, is to help you do that. Is to help you select the right people and arm them with the tools that they're going to need through programs that were described by some of my peers. Our world today with its technology is even more increasing the challenges around how we communicate. Like we can wait with information, we have to be ready to address any of our employees' concerns in a formidable way, in a well thought out way. And that is our expertise. Beyond the how. Our how is created with you, the fire chief, with you, the expert at what you need done. It's linked to your strategy and your strategic intent. It's to gather direct information from the source, which is you and your people, to come up with real-time solutions. And so nothing is one size fits all. There are no programs that would work for every every fire department in this country. And so that deliberation about how we get there together is the fun part of advisory service. Because parts of each of our programs may be helpful, but it's in that decision-making that we would do together, your teams and our team, that allow us to become stronger and to manage in a world that is ever changing and requiring more from us as individuals. And so that pace of change is something that we all get to work on together. And it is something that should excite us because our jobs are necessary and they are having the opportunity for us to come together in new and meaningful ways. I like to work with people that are like me in trying to solve their problems and make their work worlds better. That is my passion. Thank you, Jonathan.
David, thank you. You know, as you were talking, I had a question pop into my head, and that was this idea of you know, on the one hand, a leader is a leader because, and they've been put in that position because of their leadership skills and people thinking that they have all the answers. Have you seen any difficulty with leaders asking for advice versus thinking, oh, I've been put in this position, so I better have all the answers myself?
I think our traditional leader, Jonathan, really wants to have all their answers. I think that we have to free them from that notion, and that sometimes can be difficult. But I think what we're learning is that when you, and I'll use the pandemic as an example, none of us knew we could be as virtual as we are today. Mm-hmm. All of us realized that it is better to work with people in a similar space. But how do we bring our teams back together? And I think when we develop those answers, we're being asked and challenged by something that nobody had been faced with. So I use that as a way to free that leader from thinking that you have to have all the answers. You don't, and you can't. Mm-hmm. So allow yourself to be helped. Allow yourself to use other expertise. And you know what? It's hopefully liberating in the end, because as you gather information and share information, you're coming to an answer that's more complete.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, I have a quick question.
Please.
Yep, go for it, Gabe.
So may I ask both of you, Jonathan and David, to kind of where coaching and strategic advice or leadership coaching and strategic advisory service similarities and differences if I'm a leader accessing these two services from ICAT? You know, are they one and the same, and how are they different? And, you know, just kind of help me sort out the differences and similarities.
Good question, Gabe. With coaching, leadership coaching, as you saw in my example, the whole idea of leadership coaching is to get to know who you are. I've always believed that as a leader, your leadership comes out of who you are. Okay, not trying to be something that someone told you you needed to be as a leader, but to figure out what your perspective is on life because of your talents. Our talents generate our core beliefs and our core values. And so it's important to know that so that you know where you stand as a leader. So from that perspective, I see that as different as advisory, because advisory is saying, okay, we're here to help you make your world better. And the world is on the outside of the leader, and the coaching that I do is about figuring out the world that's going on inside the leader. David?
I love that answer, and thanks, Gabe, for the question. I would add that advisory is a complement to where we're going strategically, giving us another voice that adds context and can add structure and can add support. I think coaching is the building up of the individuals and how they help us implement that strategy. And so finding their strengths and finding the group strengths around how we individually run to attain our mission. Did that help, Gabe?
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much for that clarification. Hopefully it will help, you know, our potential clients who may be interested in these services. Thank you.
All righty. Well, we're at the end of our time together, and I think it's really interesting as I've listened to each of these presentations, this whole idea of everybody offering something that's going to help with personal and career development. And that if you think about it, when I was becoming a coach and learning coaching, one of my mentors told me that even the smallest shift in perspective, even if it was 1 millimeter, can make a huge difference down the road in our performance. And so it feels like all of us have presented solutions and opportunities to help move and shift that perspective ever so slightly to make a big difference down the road. I think of it no different than a boat. You make one small slight change to the steering, and you can end up in a completely different place than where you started, and that's all a good thing. So thank you all. And Gabe, I'm going to hand it over to you. How can people get this recording so they can listen to this on their own?
Wonderful. Jonathan, thank you so much for doing an amazing job of moderating, and thanks to everyone for doing an amazing job of presenting your function or your section. So we're gonna make the recording available by request. So we'll be sending out invitations, and you let us know your interest, and we'll send it out to you, and it will be very soon posted on our website under One Team Always. So that's one thing I wanna say. The second thing I wanna say is to go back to what my friend Michael Little said early on. So our object in all this presentation is for you, our audience, to understand this program in total, the One Team Only, I keep saying One Team Only, it's One Team Always, to have an understanding for the program, in general and specifically. So we encourage you to learn more about each one and the value it brings. And then for us to learn your organization and together to make a match. You know, usually the request we get is, I need diversity training. Guess what? To transform your organization, diversity training may be what you need. And also the advisory service may be what may be more appropriate. So we are looking forward to working with you to learn the needs of your organization, for you to learn our comprehensive solution so that we can make a good match for you. With that, I want to thank you, and you have a fantastic day.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.